Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the first fireside chat in the PC era. And we all know the PC era is the post-COVID era, the first live one in the post-COVID era. And to welcome our guest speaker for the day is our Deputy Director, Nick Pisania.
So welcome to our first face-to-face fireside chat this year, in fact. So great to be back face-to-face at SATSIN, and I hope to be able to welcome many more of you guys, especially the ones joining us by Zoom here in our new facilities here at SATSIN. So it gives me great pleasure to welcome Paul Meyers, who flew in from Singapore last night, especially to be with us here this evening. Paul is a serial entrepreneur who's now turned into a coach, specifically coaching founders. He's a head coach at Asia Founder Coaching. Paul supports founders as they clarify their purpose, focus their strategy, and maintain long-term fiery passion. He has spoken at more than 100 conferences, seminars, and trade shows. He's also a mentor at Ecosystem Consultant, which specializes in mentorship for startups and for leading companies, such as Facebook, C-Stars, Techstars, etc. So today, Paul will be speaking to us on founders' mental health. This is a very important issue, especially for founders. These are people who establish businesses and often become very passionately linked to their work. So without further ado, please welcome Paul Meyers.
Thank you. Thank you. Hi, everybody. Great to be here. Thank you, Kun Nick and Kun Ian and Kun Alex and everybody at SATSIN. Are we good on the mic? Can everyone hear this? So I wanted to talk today, as Nick said, about mental health for founders. And the way that this came about was, gosh, just about a year ago, I had a very close friend and an investor who I'd worked with for many years. And during one of my startups, and we drifted apart. He was in Canada and I was in Singapore. And sadly, he took his own life, and it was very sudden and very unexpected. And it kind of upset all of us. We'd all known him for 10, 15, 20 years. And I knew his brother and his family and his wife and his kids, and it was very shocking. And it made me think about the whole journey that we go through as founders. And for you who are founders or you who work with founders, you know how intense this can be, that you become part of your company, you associate yourself with the company, the failures and wins and losses and successes and failures all become part of you, and your mental health goes along with that, up and down. And that can be very difficult sometimes, okay? And sometimes have not great results. So what I wanted to do, I wrote an article. I started to write an article about this. I never finished the article, but it turned into this talk. And I've given this talk now, gosh, about 15 or 20 times. And this is the first time I've actually done it with a live audience. In fact, I was thinking today, like, when was the last time I spoke to a live audience? And I can't even remember. So it was 2 years ago, 3 years ago, somewhere in there. So thank you all for showing up and showing up on Zoom. And so I'll get started now, but that's the genesis. So the agenda, a little bit about me. We'll talk about why we're here. Get a deep dive into mental health and founders, and then the 4 things that I've come up with, and then some Q&A from your side, okay? And I do want to have some Q&A here because when I do this in Singapore, nobody asked me questions, and now we're in Thailand, so I expect you to ask some questions, okay? Please, otherwise I'll make it difficult and I'll ask you questions to ask me, okay? So a little bit about me. I'm American. I've been in Asia almost 30 years now. I came as a filmmaker initially, and I kind of morphed into a founder. And over the years, excuse me, I founded a number of companies. I've had 2 successful exits. One of them was a NASDAQ listing. One of them was a trade sale. During this time, I helped start a company that went from 4 people to 650 people, and that NASDAQ listing, we did that in 2.5 years, kind of a wild ride. I learned how to raise money. I raised 60 some odd million dollars, and then we went public. Okay. During that time also, I started mtvasia.com and brought a lot of Western media brands to the Asian internet space and Internet 1.0. So I've raised a lot of money. I've done those kinds of things. I worked at Asian Development Bank. I helped them build their venture fund called ADB Ventures, which is it was their very first venture fund, and it was focused on impact investing across emerging markets. I also ran Telstra's accelerator program called Burudi, and we did that for a year, and we will have probably the very first unicorn in Bangladesh, probably in August, came out of our program. So we're very proud about that. So that's a little bit about who I am. During COVID, I started to think about what I wanted to do next, and I thought that coaching would be the way to go. So that's where we are. Okay. So I started Asia Founding Coaching. And as Nick said, really trying to help regional founders, primarily post-Series A founders, find their purpose again, clarify their focus, help them as they get a little lost, help them grow, help them scale, and primarily in Southeast Asia. And of course, I have a slogan, as all good companies do. So my slogan is better call Paul. Okay, so when you're a founder and you're having one of those experiences, you know what to do now. Okay, good. So before we get started and go deep, a caveat here: I'm not a psychiatrist or a psychologist. I'm a founder, a turned coach. So I have these recommendations that have worked for me, have worked for some of the people I work with, and I hope they help you. But if you're in a dangerous place and you're feeling shaky and you're feeling a little unsafe, I really urge you to also go speak to a professional. I'm not a professional psychiatrist or psychologist, but I'm here to help, and I hope this helps you. Okay. So who are you? I'm just trying to figure out here. How many people are founders in this room? Some? Couple? Yeah? Okay. Handful? Great. How many people have been founders in the past? Couple more. Okay, good. Hard to tell over there out in Zoom land, but we'll say 20%. Okay, good to know. So you probably know what's going on here. So I worked with a guy named Craig Dixon, and he likes to say that entrepreneurs are one of humanity's greatest catalysts for positive change. And I totally agree with this, okay? That people who are building new companies and trying new things, building new products, really important and important to our lives, and especially here at Sassen when we talk about sustainability and entrepreneurship. Those are the people, the founders, who are going to make a big difference, right? And I'm totally behind that, but it's hard, okay? And so some of you may know this quote. It's a pretty famous quote, okay? Mr. Horowitz from Andreessen Horowitz said this while he was running his own company, and it's totally true. If you've ever been a founder, you know that this is all you think about. You wake up in the middle of the night crying like a baby, right? So it's a risky business. We know this. So this is a study done in San Francisco, out of San Francisco State a couple of years ago, and founders are more likely to suffer from depression, from ADHD, from substance abuse, from bipolar disorders, psychiatric hospitalization, and suicidal thoughts. Not a real good ad for becoming a founder, right? It's not the best job description that you want to see. But we continue to do it. And then some other facts. This is a recent study from Singapore, done last year. As you can see, taking a toll on mental health, feel exhausted, anger, anxiety, sadness, easily irritated. Again, if you're a founder, you know all of this to be true because this is you, right? And you've been through this and you know how you feel here. One of the more surprising things, though, that I found in the research, especially from the research in Singapore here, and I think this is true not only in Singapore, but in other places, is that male founders are much more vulnerable. Even though there are far fewer male founders, probably 20% of, generously 20% of founders right now in Southeast Asia are female, okay? But the male founders are much more vulnerable because they don't talk. If you're a guy or you know a guy, and most of you do know guys, you know that we don't talk, we don't open up. This is hard for us to do. And so what happens is it makes it harder for them and they suffer more. Okay, so if you're a guy, talk, okay? That's my recommendation to you. Open up, start talking about it. It'll make this stuff a lot easier. So let's talk about the founder journey a little bit. It can certainly be awesome, and you can come up with great products. You can come up with great solutions. You can help hundreds or thousands or maybe millions of people, and that's really why we're doing this. But, okay, it causes some stress, and there's pressure to succeed, and the fear of failure is very high. And we don't always go to look for help. So, sorry. One of the reasons this occurs is in the press, there's a myth about what a successful founder looks like, right? And we all know these faces, and we feel pressure whether we know it or not. There's this media that is saying these are what successful founders look like, and this is what success is. You got to be a multi-billionaire, zillionaire, shoot rockets to the moon, whatever that is. But that's not necessarily true. There are other myths that go along with this also, especially in Asia. We have family pressures, people, your folks, your aunts, your uncles, your grandparents. There's pressure on you to be a success. Or not to be a success necessarily, but why aren't you a doctor? Why aren't you a lawyer? Why aren't you like your brother? Why aren't you like your sister? These are the voices that are going on in our heads quite a bit, okay? So in reality, it's like this, okay? There is this pressure for us to succeed as founders. So keeping this inside and keeping this to yourself is not good for you. It's not pretty, it can be costly, it can be not very healthy for you. And it touches on all of our relationships, whether it's our families at home, our loved ones, our partners, our kids, our parents, our coworkers. The more that you're stressed, the more that you're unhappy, the more that you're feeling this pressure, it affects all of these kinds of things. So I call this the cave, okay? And we all have our own stories as founders, and I want to share with you a little bit about what one of my stories was. I built a company called Acme Mobile that distributed mobile games and ringtones and all those kinds of things that we used to do about 10 years ago on our phones, right? And I was looking to raise money, and a company came and offered to buy us for cash. It was very heady, you know, a nice amount of money in the 8 figures US. And since I own 60% of the company, that sounded very attractive. We're all ready to make this deal, and the deal was going through, and we signed a term sheet and was all ready to execute. And then they pulled out at the very last minute because it was the financial crisis. I had 45 people working around the region for me. I had 2 months of runway of money in the bank. And nobody was raising money at this point. It was the financial crisis. All the stocks were down to nothing. There was no loans available. There was no investment available. And I was like freaked out. I had 3 young kids at home. My marriage wasn't doing well. That was my cave. So every night I'd go home and think about these 40 some people working for me. I thought about my kids. I thought about my marriage. I thought about my company. I've been doing it for 7 years. It was very much me. Am I a failure? Is this going to work? Is this not going to work? It was tough. That was my cave. And not every founder goes through something quite as extreme, but you all go through it. I know that. We've all had those moments where we're scared about our company. We're scared about our success. We're scared about what we look like, who we are. And that's what I call the cave. So what can you do about it? when you're in the cave, it's hard and it's dark and it's scary. What kind of practice and tools do you have that can help you? And you don't even have to be in the cave for these. You can just be plain old scared or nervous or worried or have it before in the morning and you're waking up and crying like a baby, okay? And that's what we're going to talk about today. So enough about the problems. Let's talk about some solutions. So anybody who knows me knows that I like to eat, maybe a parent. And in New Orleans cooking, we have what's known as the Holy Trinity, which is onions and celery and capsicum, okay? This is not going to be a food talk. It's not this Holy Trinity. What we're going to talk about, and we're not going to talk about the other Holy Trinity, which are the things that your parents probably taught you about how to feel good, okay? Eating well, exercising, and sleeping well, right? You should know this by now. None of us do it. None of us do all three of it. I know that, but we all know that this is what we should be doing, right? But we're not going to talk about this either. There are other things we can discuss, and that's where we're going to go today. So my 4 things: talking, touching, helping, and celebrating. All right, and we'll talk a little bit about this today. So let's start talking about talking. Sorry, this is all a little slow. So the most obvious one, but often the hardest to do, is founders do not talk. And guy founders do not talk either. We know that even more. All right. So when you speak and when you talk to other people and you get your fears out, this gets rid of your ghosts. This helps you just voice those kinds of things that are bothering you, right? And it's amazing how many founders don't talk to other people or talk to other founders about what's going wrong. They're scared about money. They're scared about failure. They're scared about not being Jack Ma, whatever it is. Those people are not, you as founders are not talking about these things. So who do you talk to? Who can you talk to? This is important. And this in your community, you have friends, you have family, you have therapists, you even have coaches. These are the kinds of things that you can do to start to talk out these problems, okay? And you can also speak with other founders. And this is one thing that I found now and recently that is really important, but it wasn't available as I was starting companies, right? Founders tended to isolate. They tended to be, hide themselves away, bury themselves with work, not show that they're scared or they have problems or that they're worried. There we go. Okay, and virtually every city where you have founders, you now have organizations and you now have the ability to meet with other founders, either casually or formally, to talk about what's going on as a founder, right? And that's important to do, and I really encourage other founders to do that. Okay. So here in Bangkok and also in Singapore, there's a new organization called Founder Circle, and it was started here in Bangkok by Kun Nikan, who is here with Kun Aim, if you all know Aim. He's a familiar face in the startup community here in Bangkok. And I've just started this in Singapore, where it's the ability to bring together small groups of founders and have kind of a mastermind session over 2 or 3 hours to really start to get those kinds of things out, get the opinions on the table, talk to other founders, feel what it's like, get some relief that, you know, I'm not alone, I'm not crazy, I'm not any of those things, but be able to talk to other people. So I really encourage joining something like this. There's another organization here in the region called SEA Founders. It's a little older, it's a little bigger, but there are different organizations everywhere. And I really encourage you as a founder, if you're not talking to other founders, join one of these groups. We could meet people there who have the same set of issues and problems, and it's good for you and you'll learn a lot. So that's number one, okay? So that's talking. Now let's talk about touching. I discovered this as I was in my cave, is that I stopped touching people. I really started, I had kids, I had a wife, I had a dog, but wasn't touching anyone. And what you start to get is known as a condition called touch starvation. And what that is basically, you don't get enough physical touch and you can become stressed and anxious and depressed, which creates cortisol in your body, all right? And this makes your heart rate, blood pressure, muscle tension, and breathing rate go up, okay? Just by not touching people. And that in turn is even worse for you in that it causes to bad sleep and higher infection rate and other medical conditions, none of which you want, in addition to being stressed and all of those things with your founding company, okay? So touch starvation is a real issue and founders have this quite a bit. So why does it help? Why does touching help? We have aliens. So another hormone called oxytocin can counteract the effects of stress and make us feel better. All right, and oxytocin comes from it's hugging, kissing, cuddling, even during sex. Okay, so it's a really good hormone to be producing, right? And it's pretty easy to do. Okay, and what happens is it's linked to warm and fuzzy feelings, and has been shown to lower stress and anxiety, and create pro-social behaviors. So oxytocin is important. In fact, it's so important. Does anyone know who this is? Am I the only cool kid in the room? Yes, it's Billie Eilish. And Billie Eilish has a song, actually a hit song called Oxytocin, in about six months ago, right? I can't believe nobody in this room knew that. Only Nikon. So ways to get your touch fix. This I like, okay? This is like super easy. Family, hugs, kids, spouse, partner, whatever, obvious, right? Friends, same thing. Especially now that we can start to do this again, where it's cool, post-COVID, PC era, right? We can start to touch other people. Animals, so if you have pets, if you have other friends who have pets. Massage, and this one I really like. So the research says that if 15 minutes of giving a massage gives you the same hit of oxytocin as 15 minutes of getting a massage. So you could go either way and it works just as easily. So I highly recommend that. And of course, the old favorite, cat cafes, okay? And I used to think that cat cafes were simply about 15-year-old girls going and playing with cats. But no, it's not true. Actually, spending time with animals, spending time playing with cats or dogs or rabbits. I guess we have all sorts of variations now. Anybody, including us old guys, still get that same oxytocin hit from doing this. So I highly recommend this. It sounds weird, it sounds naff. You won't get kicked out, don't worry. But it still gives you that same oxytocin hit, which is total opposite of feeling scared and feeling that touch, kind of missing that touch, right? So don't be a creep, okay? Little message here. Respect personal space and cultural norms. Not every culture allows you to run up and hug people. Some don't like it at all. Not all women like to be hugged by strange men. Not all men like to be hugged by strange men or strange women either. So follow your cultural norms, be smart, but don't be a creep while you do this. But still, you can still hug people, okay? All right. So help. The third thing we can do that's pretty easy is help. So when I was a kid, I was a Boy Scout, okay, as everybody, males my age were. And the Boy Scout motto is do a good deed daily. And when I was a kid, when I was 13 or 14, doing a good deed daily was often portrayed as helping a little old lady across the street. And so as you can imagine, a group of 15-year-old males like really thought this was pretty naff. We didn't agree with this at all. We thought it was kind of silly. We never did this. But the reality is, and here's my story, the second part of my story. So ultimately, I sold that company my mobile company. I was able to sell it, but I did get divorced. So I was a single dad with 3 young kids. The job I had for 7 or 8 years, which was my identity, was gone. I didn't know what to do. I was lost. I was adrift. And some friends said, why don't you come and help teach some kids to swim? And it turns out this group of kids were had mental disabilities, okay? And nobody really was paying attention to them in Singapore. So every Saturday we'd go out and spend a couple hours helping them swim. And so I went, and it was amazing. I felt better after a couple of hours of doing this than I had in months. And it turns out I kept doing this a little bit more. I had helped kids read who didn't know how to read in English. I helped cook for people who were sick or pregnant or having kids or whatever. I was helping to do that. And then eventually just, helping people move and do different kinds of things. And each time I did this, I found I was getting this real bump, this real buzz from helping other people out. We can talk about why this is. Maybe it's good karma, maybe not, I don't know if you believe in that, but dozens of studies have shown that participation in voluntary activities significantly predict rises in self-satisfaction, better mental health, self-esteem, happiness, etc. Okay, so just taking yourself out of thinking about yourself and thinking about helping somebody else, really quite productive, really quite helpful. And I highly recommend it to my coachees, the people I work with, and to myself and to my kids. If you're really kind of thinking too much about yourself and woe is me and how horrible and difficult my life is, I really recommend doing something for somebody else. It really turns the table quite quickly. And then finally, the one everybody likes is the cupcakes, celebrating. And so this came about, I realized this came about when I was coaching a friend who was running an ad tech company in Scotland during the pandemic, and his team was all over the world. He had people in Estonia, he had people in Ukraine, he had people in Taiwan, he had people in Vietnam, and he was finding that he talked to them every week. They were they weren't there anymore. They were losing focus. They didn't feel like they were a team. So I started to talk to him about what they did together as a team. How did they celebrate their wins? How did they celebrate birthdays or holidays or anything like that? And it turns out they didn't do any of that together. And of course, it's easy to get into that, especially if your team is dispersed, physically dispersed. You're not seeing each other on a regular basis, those kinds of things. So what we did was we started to have him celebrate wins and figure out ways to get the whole team involved and get the whole team to celebrate. And some of those things, this releases dopamine, another neurotransmitter, there's some science to all of this happiness bit, okay? And it releases the dopamine, which makes you feel better. So what we did was we set it up so that we ordered pizzas for the team, and everybody had pizza and wine delivered to their house simultaneously, even though it was like 7 in the morning sometimes in Vietnam or in Estonia where we did this when they had a win. They had people sing songs, they had people dress up, and they started doing ritualized celebration of what was going on positively in the company. And very quickly, the company started doing much better and everybody felt better. And I think this is really important to remember, especially as we're separated, that we don't celebrate so much anymore. We're thinking about the next win, the next KPI, the next quarterly review, the next $1 million in the door, the next product release. Especially as a startup, this is a relentless kind of roadway. And unless you stop and you smell the roses, you're going to burn out and your team's going to burn out and people aren't going to want to work with you anymore, right? So why do you want to do that? So remember, go back. Here's a summary of the 4 things. They are talk, touch, help, and celebrate. All easy to do. You don't need to spend any money doing any of these things. You don't need to get out of your comfort zone. They're all easy to do. They're right there for you. They're super helpful. I found them to work for myself, for my teams, for my coachees, and I hope that they can help you too. So that is it for the talk. I'd like to entertain questions now. So thank you. Questions?
Hey, Paul, great talk.
Thanks.
I'm curious, in your mind, how is being a founder different now than it was 10 or 15 years ago, in your perception?
So 10 or 15 years ago, we didn't know how to be founders, right? Right now, there's 10 or 15 years of experience, there's books, there's an industry, there's venture capitalists, there's entrepreneurship programs, all of those things exist where 10, 15 years ago, you simply didn't have it. So you were kind of doing it on your own and making it up as you went along. There might be books, there might be articles. If there were, they were very Silicon Valley oriented. So you read about people raising $10 or $15 million rounds where you're struggling to raise $500,000. So very different that way. Now you have people you can call, programs you can go to, join, accelerators, books, universities, coaches, whatever. Those didn't exist before.
Just wondering, Sid here. So just wondering, is it any different that you see between maybe like Asian founders versus US or European founders in terms of mental health? I mean, I know that you've lived in Asia in the last 30 years, but different type of founders, even though there's in this region, do they have similar journey or there are some differences?
Good question. Yes, with the caveat that, yeah, I've lived in Asia 30 years, but what I see as a coach and as a mentor and as an investor is that Asian founders don't talk about themselves very much, okay? They tend to keep it closed, whether it's a cultural issue and a face issue, or whether that's just how they've been brought up, or whether it's uncomfortable for them because they've never been asked. And I know this is a generalization and a broad brush, but that's really what I see more of. And that's really what I try to work with founders in Asia is maybe they need to have a small group around them to open up. Maybe it has to be one-on-one. Maybe we have to talk about their parents for a few weeks and then it starts to come out, because there's a lot of family issues as well, family pressures that I see in Asia that I don't see in the States, right? Expectations. So generally it takes a little longer for them to open up. Not impossible though, by any means.
Hi, yeah, I have a question. So there's this image of founders and how they have to, keep up the hustle, I guess. And this talk kind of makes it seem like it's something that is a given. Do you think it's like something that comes with being a founder? It's not something you can avoid? Or is it just because you end up loving what you do so much, you forget to think about your mental health and can it be separated, do you think?
Oh, you don't need to be a founder to experience all of these things or any one of these things. We can just be normal humans and experience them as well. And I think these 4 things also help in those instances. I mean, if you think about the last time you celebrated a win, or the last time that you hugged somebody, or the last time that you played with a dog, or any of those kinds of things, those are instant gratification, right? If you volunteered to help somebody swim or move their house or any of those things, they're really positives and they really have a response, and actually a chemical response. I mean, we know that the science is there to tell us that. So you don't have to be a founder. Was that your question?
My question was more, is it always stressful being a founder?
I think it's more, in my experience, it's more stressful being a first-time founder because you haven't done this stuff and you haven't been through it and you don't know what it's like. I think the second or third time, or like if you're a real glutton for punishment, you do it more than 3 times, you know what it's going to be. This is going to be tough. You set up support systems, you make sure that you have the right team, you treat yourself better, you're healthier. But generally, first-time founders go through, most first-time founders go through most of this.
Paul, I think, all four techniques are very effective, and I think most of us have used one or the other from time to time. I'm curious as to which one, if you had to pick just one and say, let's start here, which one would you sort of pick to prioritize?
For me, I can only speak about myself, okay? I think the one that was the most helpful for me and the biggest surprise was volunteering, was helping. I really didn't expect that at all. I just went because I was feeling bad about myself. Woe is me, my life's a mess, woohoo. And then actually I helped these kids, and it was a revelation. It really, the difference before and after 2 hours was very significant. So that was for me, but it could be different for different people. I mean, a lot of people isolate physically and don't touch other people, or don't touch pets, or don't hug their kids or their partners or whatever. So it could be that. Like my friend in Scotland, who was, pretty balanced the rest of his life, they weren't celebrating at all. And his company was really teetering because of that. And so as a result of just being able to have a ritual celebratory celebration and time with his company, it really, I think it saved the company. So it can be different for different people.
Yeah. We have one question from Kun Fan. Have you observed differences between male and female founders?
Good question. In these terms, again, in general, very broad brush, I find that it's easier for female founders to talk about what they're feeling. And I think the same with male and female non-founders. It's easier for women to talk about their feelings. But certainly, as they are founders, we could get into, when I'm coaching, we can get into the issues a lot faster because they're a little bit more comfortable in their own skin talking about what they're worried about, or what they're feeling, what's stressing them out. Other questions? What? I see one. We need a mic.
So I really agree on 4 points that you talked today, and I do everything every day with my my friends. Like I have like startup team, still talk to them, but then so the CEO, like the leader of the team, he not really a person like doing those 4 things. Even like I'm like the person that do all 4 things, but like it's really difficult to do the ice breaking and like ask him to do those things, because I know it's important, but like the leader is still like not really like agree with that. Can you recommend how can I like talk to him, or like make him like feel like those things are normal and he should do it?
Wow, really good question, and a difficult situation to be in. It's much easier if you're the boss and you realize, hey, let's have a party, So I'm not trying to dodge the question here, but it really depends on that person and their personality. Sometimes you specifically can easily suggest to them, hey, I'd feel better, the team would feel better if we did X. Sometimes bosses don't want to hear that, and some bosses think they know everything, and it's hard to do it. So I would recommend then doing some of the stuff on your own and taking the initiative yourself. I don't think you're going to get fired for celebrating other people's wins or taking people out to cat cafes or something like that, okay? Especially if the response is good and it's visible that the team responds well to it. But some people just don't, it doesn't sink in, it's not natural for a variety of reasons. That doesn't mean they're bad people, it just means they don't see it, they don't get it. So if they don't hear it from you, I'd say take steps that don't get you fired, but are still positive.
Thank you.
Hey, Paul, we're back. I'm curious, how has coaching changed your perspective about being a founder? What have you noticed compared to when you weren't a coach?
I'm like 100 times better listener now. You know, I listen more attentively and more detailed, and I try to shut up and listen rather than be right or prescribe or tell people what they need to be doing. The shoulds. I try to avoid saying should in my life, and I try to avoid it as a coach, and more so as a coach now. I find this. So separate from these four things, I think being a good listener is really, really important to be a good founder and to be a real team leader. So I'd recommend that quite a bit. Anyone out in Zoom land? I see Zoom over here.
If not, then let's have one more round of applause for Paul. Thank you very much, Paul.
Thank you.
And
Thanks,
we have
everybody.
A special gift for you for coming all the way up here to talk to us.
Oh, great. Okay, thank you, everybody. Thanks for coming. Thanks out there in Zoom land.